Before the 17th century, Europe was a continent soaked in mild intoxication, from peasants to nobles, from craftsmen to clergy. People drank beer or wine not for pleasure, but for survival. Water was dangerous, often contaminated with bacteria and debris, making every sip a gamble with death. Europeans lived in a hazy world where light drunkenness was the norm. The economy moved slowly. Minds were dulled, and great ideas, if they emerged at all, often dissolved into alcohol. Then one day, a dark, bitter liquid arrived at the ports: coffee, NET, and later cacao, each containing a small molecule called caffeine. Instead of sedating, it awakened. Instead of blurring the mind, it sharpened it. That seemingly harmless shift from alcoholic drinks to caffeinated ones sent shockwaves through human civilization. For the first time in history, people began to work more alertly, for longer hours, and with greater organization. If coal and steam were the material fuels of the Industrial Revolution, caffeine was its biological fuel, a single molecule that reset the rhythm of time, restructured labor, and redefined what a working day meant. Legend has it that in the 9th century, a goat herder named Kaldi in the Ethiopian highlands noticed his goats behaving strangely after eating berries from a small tree. They danced through the night, unable to sleep. Kaldi brought the berries to a monastery, where monks soon discovered that they helped them stay awake during long nights of prayer. From those red berries, coffee's journey began, traveling from Ethiopia to Yemen, from Arabia to Istanbul, then across the Mediterranean to Venice, London, and Paris. Wherever it arrived, caffeine triggered an intellectual shift. In the 17th century, as coffee and tea spread across Europe, the first coffee houses, known in London as penny universities, emerged. For the price of 1 penny, you could buy a cup of coffee and the right to debate all day. Merchants, philosophers, and scientists gathered there to exchange news, ideas, and knowledge. Isaac Newton, Robert Hooke, Edmund Halley, names that shaped modern science, were all men of the coffee house. They left noisy taverns behind and entered spaces fueled by caffeine and conversation. If alcohol intoxicated the mind with illusion, coffee intoxicated it with thought. These coffee houses became Europe's first social networks, where information spread faster than ever before. And when people began to wake up together, a new social rhythm was born, a rhythm of reason, work, and efficiency. A new world emerged, one where energy no longer came from fermentation, but from molecules. When the Industrial Revolution erupted, caffeine became the silent god of time. Before that era, human life followed the sun: work by daylight, rest by darkness. But when steam engines began screaming inside the factories of Manchester and Birmingham, natural light was no longer the sole measure of time. Factory bells replaced the sun. Assembly lines replaced biological rhythms. Caffeine arrived precisely when humanity needed a biological tool to synchronize itself with machines. A cup of coffee before a night shift, a pot of tea during a break. These were not mere habits, but rituals to sustain productivity. The concept of the coffee break emerged in the 19th century. Originally, a small concession to factory workers in Wisconsin. Over time, it became a global symbol of the industrial economy, a moment to recharge alertness amid endless rotation. Caffeine helped humans bend the limits of the circadian rhythm. The brain no longer slept according to the sun, but according to work shifts. The body no longer listened to natural drowsiness, but obeyed factory schedules. Historians call this the time discipline revolution, in which clocks and caffeine together redesigned human life. Where farmers once looked to the sun to know when to work, industrial workers needed only to look at their coffee cup. It was no longer just a beverage, but a symbol of enforced wakefulness, a sign that humans could modify both nature and themselves in the name of efficiency. Caffeine did not only restructure daily life, it redrew the global map of power. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe's exploding demand for coffee and tea fueled an unprecedented wave of colonial exploitation. Western empires needed land, climate, and labor resources found in Asia, Africa, and South America, tea plantations in India and Sri Lanka, coffee plantations in Brazil, Java, and Ethiopia spread rapidly. Millions of local farmers were pulled into the machinery of global trade, becoming instruments in Europe's thirst for caffeine. Tea, often seen as a symbol of British refinement, was, in reality, the product of vast systems of sweat and exploitation. Coffee, emblematic of Paris, or Vienna, was born in distant colonial landscapes. Caffeine even became a catalyst for war. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, when American colonists dumped tons of tea into the harbor to protest taxation, ignited the American Revolution. In China, Britain's dependence on tea contributed to the Opium Wars, as narcotics were used to pay for caffeine. A mindless molecule moved empires, linking Indian farmers, British merchants, and Parisian workers into a single global exchange system. Caffeine became the neurotransmitter of capitalism, connecting individual brains to the global production network. At the molecular scale, it triggered alertness. At the societal scale, it activated the world economy. By the 21st century, caffeine had traveled far beyond the coffee cup. It became a symbol of the knowledge economy, where humans labor not only with muscles, but with minds. If in the 19th century caffeine kept factory workers standing for 12-hour shifts, today it keeps programmers awake for 20 hours before a deadline. No longer merely natural, caffeine was reborn in synthetic forms: energy drinks, tablets, chewing gum, supplements, from Coca-Cola to Red Bull, from mega coffee chains to productivity startups. Caffeine became the faith of hustle culture, a world where sleep is treated as a luxury, and alertness is measured in KPIs. Neuroscientists classify caffeine as a nootropic, a mild cognitive enhancer. It does not make you smarter, but it delays fatigue and sustains focus. In modern offices, caffeine replaced factory bells with the sound of espresso machines. Each sip carries a promise: 30 more minutes of productivity, one more page of a report, one more line of code. Yet a paradox emerges. When everyone optimizes themselves using the same molecule, efficiency returns to equilibrium. Caffeine is no longer an advantage, but a baseline, a silent biological obligation. In a world where wakefulness is mandatory, sleep is increasingly treated as a system error. Caffeine, once a tool of intellectual liberation, has become a chain of productivity, a blurred boundary between freedom and dependence, between creativity and exhaustion. If any molecule has shaped the modern world, it is not uranium, nor silicon, but caffeine. It pulled humanity out of intoxication and into the age of reason. It synchronized us with machines, structured working hours, enabled globalization, and ultimately turned alertness into a modern belief. From the forests of Ethiopia to New York offices, from 17th century London coffee houses to 21st century energy drink cans, caffeine is the thread connecting biology and civilization. But like all technologies, it has a dark side. When alertness becomes compulsory, the human body resists sleeping later, feeling more exhausted, growing more dependent. Perhaps the greatest lesson caffeine teaches us is not how to stay awake, but when to stop. Because in the long game between productivity and biology, wakefulness is not freedom, it is responsibility.